hauntings can be different for all people. You have some that merely involve moving objects, others that entail apparitions roaming around, and there are more malevolent cases that have reports of physical violence and assaults revolving around them. Then you have the truly frightening accounts that involve all of the above. One of the most terrifying hauntings in history happened to one very unfortunate family in the 1970s. It involved a group of spirits with an inclination for violence and mayhem. The story of one of the most frightening and violent hauntings of all times starts in 1974 with a single mother by the name of Doris who lived in Culver City, California with her 4 children. The family had moved there from Santa Monica in order to try and start a new life after a string of abusive relationships that Doris had been in, and to try and escape her reliance on alcohol. It was a rough time, as Doris had barely enough money to raise her 4 children, who all had different fathers. They were a broken family living in poor, dirty conditions. But things would soon get worse when something dark and paranormal came along. It started rather creepily with an elderly woman who came over one day shortly after they'd moved in to tell Doris out of the blue that she had once lived in a home and that it was evil, before wandering off never to be seen again. As it turned out, the words the elderly lady spoke were to come true. Not long after this, there would be instances of classic poltergeist activity, such as lights turning on and off, objects moving on their own, and strange noises, all of which were witnessed by all the family members. Then things graduated to a more frightening level when apparitions would start to appear. At first it was just glimpses, a shadow figure moving across the living room, a movement out of the corner of someone's eye. But it got steadily more intense, and even neighbours began seeing these things around the house. The figures that were seen started to take shape, appearing as a fog-like human entity that would move about or sit in the corner and simply watch the family. Doris's middle son Brian said, "It was never clear when they would make themselves known. It was always like fog or mist that looked human-shaped. It wasn't a full figure, but at times we could see some of it. It would be annoying. We would be watching television and these things would walk by. We were so used to the poltergeist that it got to the point where we wouldn't even care." It became increasingly clear that there were more than one of these entities as well, either 3 or 4 of them, depending on who you ask. Brian said that there were 4. This spooky paranormal activity, although scary at first, was mostly harmless. It would not stay that way for long, soon becoming increasingly terrifying. Not content to just wander around and cause mischief, the entities began to lash out at the family, pushing, shoving, hitting, and even clawing or biting them. And this would happen at all hours, even in the middle of the day. Brian said we all experienced some form of attack. There was the pushing, biting and scratching being done to us. There were about 4 entities in the home, and they made themselves known by appearing all the time. I think it took a lot of energy for them to do that. It was as if they showed themselves whenever they felt like it. Although he said there were 4 of the spirits, Doris herself would later claim that there were only 3. Even more terrifying still was that the entities began to actively target Doris the most. It went from simple pushes, scratches and bites to full-on assault, with the spirits allegedly holding her down while they beat her. This would happen in the next room, while the terrified children listened to the bangs, thuds and their mother's desperate screams. But it would also on occasions happen right in front of them. Brian said the whole thing was real. My room was right next door to my mother's. I would hear the attacks happening, things being thrown, her screaming. Then she would come out of the bedroom and have bruises on her face, arms and legs. There were times when we would see it happen in front of us. It was like a man was standing in front of my mother and would start to beat her. We could see her being picked up and thrown around. We could hear the sounds, the slaps and the punches. But there was no physical person there to actually do it. We all felt it too, pulling, biting and scratching. We were all attacked. These vicious attacks carried on, with the apparitions appearing without warning practically every day and night, and it got to the point where the family were desperate for anyone to help them. The biggest of the entities even gained a creepy nickname for himself, Mr. Who's It. Doris approached paranormal investigators and parapsychologists Kerry Gaynor and Dr. Barry Taff, who were intrigued by her terrible story and went about arranging a full investigation into the case. They would not be disappointed. The team moved in for their investigation on August the 22nd, 1974, thinking at first there would not be much to this other than a seriously disturbed young woman. The first thing they did was take a look at her bruises, scratches and scars that she had all over her body, which had allegedly been inflicted by the entities, and which proved to be far more savage and severe than they had expected. Doris told them there were 3 of them, despite her son's claims that there were 4, and that the 2 smaller ones would hold her down while the bigger one beat her. Intrigued, but not yet sold, the investigators set up their equipment in an effort to gather any evidence at all of a haunting. When this was done, they had Doris go into one of the rooms where the most activity had been occurring and told her to start yelling and cursing at the unseen entities, trying to draw them out. Almost immediately there was intense orb activity captured on the equipment, with spots of light darting all over the place. After this, Doris was seen to be surrounded by a green-coloured mist, followed by the materialisation of what appeared to be the upper torso of a man, which hovered there in the mist, and was apparently so terrifying that one of the investigators fainted. This torso was not captured on the equipment, but there is a photo of Doris with a strange arc of light appearing over her. This story of intense paranormal activity would continue for the next several months of the investigation, including apparitions, mysterious lights, temperature drops, horrific mystery odours and moving objects. It was even noticed that the investigators' presence actually seemed to anger and irate the entities, and it was also found that playing music by the heavy metal group Black Sabbath also seemed to cause a surge in activity, making it all stronger. But then it suddenly started to wind down and stopped altogether for no reason. In later years, Doris would move her and her family to other places on several occasions, but according to her, each time they moved, the entities would follow them, although they were somewhat weaker than they had been. Even though her case had become quite well known at the time, Doris herself would eventually drop off the radar for years before finally passing away due to cardiac arrest in 1995. So what exactly happened to this poor woman and her family? What sort of spirits targeted them and why? Well, that would depend a lot on who you ask. But according to Taff himself, it had nothing at all to do with ghosts or spirits as we imagine them. Taff is convinced that the phenomena were caused by the subconscious human mind lashing out through psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with the mind. In his theory, this was the result of various factors coming together to cause the mind of a victim to reach out to wreak havoc on the outside world, most often without their awareness that they are even doing so. He is so insistent that this is the case, and such hauntings are caused by the projections of living beings rather than demons, that he has expressed a hatred for these paranormal ideas, saying, "I don't for one second believe that this is the work of dead people throwing living people around. As there are no academic credentials required for anyone to go out and investigate the paranormal, every New Age groupie is out there looking for demons, copying the garbage they've seen on cable TV paranormal shows. To fully comprehend the possibility that a living person's subconscious mind can involuntarily generate such power as to manifest anomalies and apparitions is, for me, far more compelling than a deceased person being responsible." Thanks for watching. Bye for now.